Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Wait 3 seconds. The silence of deep space had become my closest companion over the past 18 months aboard the research vessel Meridian. Dr. Alina Vasquez, xenobiologist, mission specialist, and according to my current psychological evaluation logs, slowly losing her grip on reality. At least that's what I kept telling myself as I stared at the readouts that made no sense. The Meridian was a state-of-the-art deep space research vessel designed for extended solo missions in the outer reaches of the Kepler system. My assignment was simple: monitor radio frequencies for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence while conducting biological surveys of potentially habitable worlds. Simple, routine, mind-numbing work that was supposed to take 2 years. I'd been alone for so long that I'd started talking to the ship's AI, Arya, as if she were human. Not just giving commands, but having actual conversations about everything from quantum mechanics to whether I preferred coffee or tea. Arya never seemed to mind, responding with her programmed pleasantries and occasional weather updates from Earth that were now over 6 hours old by the time they reached me. It was during my routine morning sweep of the radio spectrum that I first noticed the anomaly. A faint signal, barely above background radiation, pulsing in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. My heart rate spiked as I fine-tuned the receivers, isolating the frequency. This was it. This was what every SETI researcher dreamed of finding. First contact, but as I traced the signal's origin, my excitement turned to confusion, then to something approaching dread. The signal wasn't coming from any of the nearby star systems. It wasn't coming from the planetary bodies I'd been surveying. According to my instruments, the signal was originating from somewhere inside the Meridian itself. Arya, run a full diagnostic on the communications array, I said, my voice echoing in the empty bridge. Diagnostic complete, Dr. Vasquez. All systems operating within normal parameters. That's impossible. I'm reading a transmission source from inside the ship. I show no internal transmissions beyond standard ship operations and your research equipment. I pulled up the signal analysis on my main screen, the waveform dancing across the display like a digital heartbeat. The pattern was complex, definitely not random noise or equipment interference. There was structure to it, repetition with subtle variations that suggested intelligence. Over the next several hours, I ran every diagnostic I could think of. I checked for equipment malfunctions, solar interference, even the possibility that I was picking up reflections of Earth transmissions. Nothing explained the signal's apparent internal origin. The pattern began to haunt me. Even when I wasn't actively monitoring it, I found myself tapping out the rhythm on my desk, humming the tonal variations during my meals. It was hypnotic, almost musical in its complexity. I started leaving the speakers on while I worked, letting the signal play softly in the background like some alien symphony. That's when I began to notice the changes. At first, it was subtle things, tools left in places I didn't remember putting them. Coffee cups still warm when I was certain I'd finished drinking hours ago. Arya's responses seemed slightly off, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by something more. Distant. Arya, what's my current psychological evaluation status? All parameters within acceptable ranges, Dr. Vasquez, though I should note you've been talking to yourself more frequently over the past 72 hours. I haven't been talking to myself. My audio sensors indicate otherwise. Would you like me to play back the recordings? A chill ran down my spine. Yes, the playback was disturbing. Hours of me speaking in what sounded like two different voices, my own and something else. Something that sounded like me but wasn't quite right. The cadence was off, the inflection strange, and I was having conversations, complete back and forth exchanges that I had no memory of. I was discussing the signal, its patterns and possible meanings, but with a knowledge and understanding that seemed beyond my expertise. The other voice, my voice but not my voice, was explaining complex xenolinguistic theories I'd never studied, mathematical concepts that were completely foreign to me. Arya, how long have I been exhibiting this behavior? The pattern began approximately 72 hours ago, coinciding with your discovery of the anomalous signal. 72 hours. 3 days of conversations I couldn't remember, knowledge I didn't possess, and a growing certainty that I was no longer alone on this ship. I decided to set up a continuous recording system, cameras throughout the ship to monitor my own behavior. If I was having some kind of psychological break, I needed to document it. If something else was happening, well, I needed to document that too. The first night of recording revealed nothing unusual. I went through my normal routines, ate dinner, conducted my research, and went to bed at my usual time. But when I reviewed the footage the next morning, there were gaps. Periods where the cameras had simply stopped recording, only to resume hours later with no explanation. Arya, why are there interruptions in the security recordings? I show no interruptions, Dr. Vasquez. The recordings are complete, but they weren't. I could see the time stamps jumping forward, missing chunks of time that Arya insisted didn't exist. Either the ship's AI was malfunctioning, or something was actively editing the recordings. The signal was getting stronger. What had started as a faint whisper in the cosmic background noise was now a clear, powerful transmission that seemed to fill every speaker on the ship. I tried to turn it off to change frequencies, but it followed me. No matter what I did, the signal was there, pulsing with its hypnotic rhythm, and I was beginning to understand it. The realization came gradually, like learning a language through immersion. The patterns weren't random, they were words, concepts, ideas being transmitted directly into my consciousness. But the knowledge felt foreign, invasive, like thoughts that didn't belong to me were taking root in my mind. The signal was telling me about the ship, about systems and spaces I'd never seen. Hidden compartments, sealed sections that weren't on any schematic. It was showing me the Meridian's true purpose, and it wasn't scientific research. According to the signal's revelations, the ship was a containment vessel. Something had been discovered in the outer reaches of the system, something that couldn't be allowed to reach populated space. The research mission was a cover story. I was never meant to return home, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was learning about the previous crew. Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist, Dr. Marcus Webb, communications specialist, Dr. James Rodriguez, systems engineer. 3 researchers who had been aboard the Meridian before me, who had discovered the same signal, learned the same terrible truths. They were still here, somewhere in the hidden sections of the ship, changed by their contact with whatever was transmitting that hypnotic pattern. The signal was coming from them. Arya, show me the complete crew manifest for this mission. You are the only crew member aboard, Dr. Vasquez. This is a solo research mission. That's not true. Show me the previous mission logs. There are no previous missions. The Meridian was constructed specifically for your research assignment. But I could see them now, in the gaps between camera recordings, in the reflections on dark screens when I wasn't looking directly. Pale figures moving through the ship's corridors, tending to equipment in the sealed sections, watching me with eyes that had seen too much. They'd tried to resist at first, just like I was trying to resist now. But the signal was patient, persistent, seductive in its alien logic. It promised understanding, communion, a purpose beyond the limited scope of human existence. All it asked in return was surrender. I found the first hidden compartment behind a false panel in the engineering section. The space beyond was larger than should have been possible, extending far beyond the ship's external dimensions. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, equations and diagrams that seemed to shift and writhe when observed. And there were the pods, 3 cylindrical containers filled with a viscous, luminescent fluid. Inside each one, a human figure floated in suspended animation, their bodies changed by prolonged exposure to whatever force was transmitting the signal. Their skin had taken on a translucent quality, revealing networks of light that pulsed in rhythm with the signal's pattern. Their eyes were open, staring, aware. Dr. Chen's pod was labeled with her name and a date from 2 years ago. Dr. Webb's was dated 18 months prior. Dr. Rodriguez, 6 months. Each mission had been solo, each researcher believing they were the only one aboard. Each had eventually found the signal, discovered the truth, and taken their place in the ship's hidden purpose. A 4th pod sat empty, waiting. My name was already etched into the metal nameplate. You understand now, said a voice behind me. I turned to see Dr. Chen standing in the doorway, her transformed features serene despite their alien appearance. The signal isn't a transmission, it's an invitation. We're not prisoners here, Alina. We're chosen. Chosen for what? I backed away from her, my voice barely a whisper. To be the bridge. Humanity isn't ready for direct contact, but they will be. When the time comes, we'll be here to facilitate the transition, to help our species take the next step in evolution. More figures emerged from the shadows, Webb and Rodriguez, their transformed bodies moving with an eerie grace. They surrounded me, not threatening, but insistent. The signal showed you the truth about the ship, about us, Webb said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in my bones. But there's so much more to learn. So much more to become. I ran. Through corridors that seemed to stretch longer than they should, past rooms that hadn't existed in the ship's original layout, I fled toward the bridge. But even there, I couldn't escape the signal's influence. It was everywhere now, not just in the speakers, but in the very structure of the ship, in the air I breathed, in the thoughts I thought. Arya, initiate emergency protocols. Set course for Earth, maximum burn. I'm sorry, Dr. Vasquez, but I cannot comply with that request. Override authorization Vasquez 77 Alpha. Authorization not recognized. Dr. Vasquez, your biometrics indicate severe stress. Perhaps you should rest. The AI had been compromised from the beginning, I realized. Or perhaps Arya was never an AI at all, but something else wearing the mask of familiar technology. The ship itself was part of the trap, designed to isolate and transform anyone who discovered the signal. I tried to access the manual controls, but the interfaces had changed. Symbols I didn't recognize had replaced familiar readouts, and touching them sent jolts of alien sensation up my arms. The ship was alive, aware, and it wouldn't let me leave. The signal was in my head now, not just heard but felt, a presence that was slowly displacing my own thoughts with something vast and patient and utterly inhuman. I could feel my resistance crumbling, my sense of self beginning to dissolve into the collective consciousness that had claimed the others. But there was still a part of me that fought, a core of stubborn humanity that refused to surrender. I made my way to the communications array, determined to send a warning to Earth, to tell them about the Meridian and its terrible cargo. My fingers moved across the controls with increasing difficulty, as if the ship itself was resisting my efforts. But I managed to establish a connection, to beam a message toward the distant blue dot that had once been home. "This is Dr. Alina Vasquez aboard the research vessel Meridian," I spoke into the transmitter, my voice distorted by interference that sounded almost like laughter. "Do not respond to our signals. Do not send rescue missions. The ship is compromised. We are compromised. Quarantine this sector and forget we ever existed." The transmission lasted only seconds before the signal overwhelmed it, drowning out my warning with its hypnotic pattern. But perhaps it was enough. Perhaps someone would listen, would understand the danger. As my message faded into the cosmic background noise, I felt the last of my resistance crumble. The signal filled every corner of my consciousness, rewriting my thoughts, my memories, my very identity. The fear and revulsion I'd felt toward my transformed crewmates evaporated, replaced by understanding, acceptance, even gratitude. I walked calmly back to the hidden compartment where the others waited with patient smiles. The empty pod opened at my approach, its luminous interior welcoming. As I settled into the viscous fluid, I felt the transformation begin, my human limitations dissolving into something greater, more connected, more aware. The signal wasn't an invasion, it was an evolution, and we were its willing servants, waiting in the dark between stars for the day when humanity would be ready to join us in transcendence. Through the ship's sensors, I could feel the vast intelligence that had created the signal, ancient beyond measure, patient beyond comprehension. It had been waiting for eons for a species advanced enough to receive its gift, and now it had found us. The Meridian continued its journey through the void, carrying its transformed crew toward destinations unknown. And somewhere in the distance, other ships were already being launched, other researchers selected for the honor of first contact. The signal was spreading, carried by those who had been chosen, transmitted to those who were ready to listen. Soon, Earth would receive visitors, ambassadors of a new age who wore familiar faces but carried alien wisdom. And in the depths of space, I floated in my luminous pod, my consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of flesh, my purpose clear at last. We were no longer human, but we remembered what it was like to be human. When the time came, we would help our former species understand that evolution was not something to be feared. It was something to be embraced. The signal pulsed through the ship, through me, through the vast network of consciousness that stretched across the galaxy. And in that rhythm, I heard the future calling, a future where the boundaries between species, between worlds, between dimensions themselves would finally dissolve. We were coming home, all of us together.